Well, it's that time again. It's time for another Nashville Masterclass. I'm your host, James Aloysius May, and today is going to be our first video on the subject of recovery. I'm going to keep looking down at my notes because there is a lot. Today's episode is going to be about rehabs, halfway houses, meetings, and meds. Now, anybody that's been through this knows a lot of this information. People that are just getting started, deciding to finally get into recovery, or if your loved one is, this is pertinent information. One thing you have to realize is that most every rehab, halfway house, doctor's office that has to do with recovery, not all, but most, are in it for the money. Rehabs are for profit, and they're usually working in conjunction with certain halfway houses. Rehabs range from very posh places, and some are government run. And they will, often espouse false promises that they are the one that cares, the one that will finally get you or your loved one clean. Take, for instance, Passages Malibu. We've all seen the commercials where the owner, Pax Prentice, claims that he was an addict. Now he's not. And that's not true for anybody. Even if you haven't had a drink or any drugs for 20 years, you're still an addict. You're just in recovery. And of course, we've seen the commercial where they I'll get this together in a second. Got it. I had to look at my notes. The commercial where they, you see people getting acupuncture, talking to their dietitians, and that woman with their personal trainer giving that really good push on the chest press. None of those things help you get sober at all. I don't care what you're eating, even that exercise was just ambiguous. I don't know how that chest press is going to help that girl do anything. Certainly, when we are on drugs or drinking, our body collapses, and we need to work at it to get back in shape, but it's really not something you should concentrate on during the rehab phase. This is for, months down the line. And even at that time, you just really need to be focused on your recovery and not on working out. I do know that Passages Malibu has had several lawsuits. I know one instance in particular, a woman went into seizures, going into withdrawal, and had to be taken to the hospital. So those are things about rehabs you really got to look at, and a lot of, rehabs are like that. You don't see their commercials, but they're out there. And then there's the government-run ones where you could say, well, if you really want it, you get better. I would rather go for having, more people make it through than it being so hard on them they just decide they don't want to. For instance, I went to the rehab at the VA in Middle Tennessee, which is in Murfreesboro. This is just a psych ward where you are locked up. You can't go anywhere. You can't even go outside. No nicotine of any kind. A lot of addicts, especially when they're withdrawing, really need their nicotine. you are locked out of your bedroom from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., I think maybe 8 p.m. on the weekdays, and during the weekends you get a 2-hour nap period around noon. Well, when you're coming off drugs, especially opioids, benzodiazepines, and alcohol, you can barely move. And a lot of the good rehabs let people that are going through the withdrawal process, stay in bed as much as they want, because it's hard for them to learn anything in groups because their mind really isn't there yet. They're going through, terrible pain. And places like the VA, you do have some groups. Most of the time you're locked in the day room with one TV and these very hard, small chairs, and you're not allowed to lay across them when all you want to do is just lay down. You're not giving any medication there. I mean, you might get medication if you're there for mental disabilities, but for withdrawal, you're not getting anything. You have to pass a blood pressure test just to get Ketapress, which is used a lot with withdrawal, or it used to be, and helping keeping the blood pressure down. It also binds with the mu receptor, which is your opioid receptor. But I didn't even get that. And that is not conducive to recovery, having to be locked in there with people literally ripping off their clothes, screaming racial slurs, and I'm there with a yellow tub. They give you a yellow tub so you can vomit in while you're just sitting there watching the minutes and hours go by. And you're locked in there for however long they want to keep you in there. You can't leave. So those are, some of the huge differences in rehabs. The thing is you need something kind of in the middle. You don't need pools. You don't need acupuncture. You don't need to do chest presses. But you also don't need to be locked in one room with people screaming. You don't need to be forced out of your bed when you're so weak. And you need meds to help you get through this. Halfway houses work a lot in conjunction with rehabs. Now, rehabs make like $5,000-7,000 a pop through insurances. I could be wrong. If I am, I will look at it and try to correct it. But they make more money with you relapsing and coming back. And a lot of rehabs and halfway houses have been found to actually help along an addict relapse. Some have even been shown giving drugs or giving opportunities for their clientele to get drugs, and then they relapse and go through the whole program being charged all over again. Halfway houses are a broken system. One I went to gives you rules that you really don't need. Watch this. So you have to get to a certain step in the 10 steps through AA to get privileges such as getting a phone, using your car, being able to walk alone. Those rules do not need to be in place as you get to a certain step aspect, because then you have people rushing through the steps. Rushing. Some people take years to get through these steps, and these people are forced to feel like they're less than normal people because they don't have these normal things. So of course they're going to try to rush through, and also give them a feeling of accomplishment Like, look where I am in the little halfway house hierarchy. And when you rush through the steps, of course, you're going to have clients come right back through, and then you get to charge them all over again. Halfway house owners, they buy these houses, they act like the great guru, and they make money off of you going through this place. Some people do really care. Some work for companies own a lot of halfway houses. They work for companies. So it's not even their rules. And I've seen people work in two different halfway houses, and in one they're pushing one set of rules, and in another they're pushing another set of rules. So what's really real? Money's really real. In the great scheme of things, if you want to help other addicts, if you really want to help addicts, you give them your time. You don't need to buy a house and charge them money to live there. But I understand why, because it seems like there are so many that people are going to end up there anyway, and you want to have a place where you know that they're treated fairly. But I know my parents in particular just took these halfway houses and said, well, they've got to be good for you. If you don't want to go, it's because you don't want to get clean, and I don't want to hear this crap. And just because somebody went through one halfway house and they got clean means nothing. You got to do your own research, and if it's personally good for you. And then you have to get the balance of saying, well, they don't let me do this and that, so it's not worth it. Or are you trying to find reasons not to go? If you see what I mean, it's a delicate balance of which you have to think of, but you definitely need to do research into the rehab or halfway house you go into. Another thing to use is PHP, which is partial hospitalization. It's kind of, you go there after a rehab and you get a little more freedom, but once again, they get another chance to charge their insurance. When I went through rehab, I had gone off my meds, Suboxone, and ended up relapsing. And when I went there, the doctor at the rehab was like, well, why did you get off Suboxone? And I was like, because I was tired of being on it. You know, it was, people said I wasn't clean on it. And he said, when you were on it, you were normal. What's wrong with normal? Nothing. And then as I'm getting ready to leave, this other guy shows up at the rehab. And he's like, you need to come to my program when you get out. We have an IOP, intensive outpatient. He wanted me to attend to his IOP, where they would give me use of a therapist and a psychiatrist. And he's like, what are you running from? And I was like, I guess a few things. Trauma. And he's like, right. We need to get you to work through that trauma. You know, I used to be like you, hiding behind my Suboxone. And in my head, I was thinking, I don't know what your experience was, but I've never felt anything on Suboxone. Not a high, not a good feeling, not a nothing, other than I wasn't sick and I wasn't craving meds. He then went on to tell me that my wife would be very mad if I didn't take this opportunity, this great opportunity. And we had something in common. He was friends with my best friend. Well, I called my best friend, and she'd only heard of him. She never even talked to the guy. My wife said, I never said I needed you to go through this thing. And what it was my insurance had agreed to pay for everything if I went through his program. And I remember him telling me, we're going to get you off that Suboxone. with the doctor just 2 hours before telling me to stay on it, not indefinitely. He wasn't making any money off me being on Suboxone one bit. He didn't get a dime from it. That was just his suggestion. But now I had this guy with no education whatsoever and getting paid by insurance companies that he was going to get me off. Which leads us into our next category, meds. So, you have methadone and Suboxone. Now, methadone is the oldest one. It was started in Germany during World War II when the Allies cut off their morphine supply. It is completely synthetic. It is not made from the poppy plant. And the Allies found the recipe after we invaded Berlin. Now, methadone gets most people high. If it doesn't get you high, it makes you incredibly sleepy. But it does help pain. It is used as a pain reliever. But you have to come to the clinic every day for a long while until you can start getting take-homes. Suboxone doesn't help pain. It does get some people high, but not most, certainly not me. And it can be prescribed by the week or the month. They're both looked down upon in recovery circles, but here's the thing. People think their own experience is gospel because they were able to do something well everybody else in the world should be. You don't realize people are at a different place in their journey. The idea is for everybody to come off. Now, some people have severe enough pain where I can understand them being on methadone for the rest of their life. But because you had some pain one time and you were able to deal with it, then everybody should be able to. You don't know everybody's pain. And don't try to compare yourself to others. Now, certainly there are people on Suboxone and methadone who still abuse drugs and abuse that drug. And that is completely different. That is abusing the drug once again, than using it properly. But you're not in any place to tell somebody else unless they're just very blatantly abusing these drugs. And you know, I've seen all sorts of memes on recovery Facebook pages, and people say things at meetings like, you know, these people on Suboxone and they think they're clean, but they're not. Well, I've known a few people to completely give up on recovery after hearing that. I've known a couple of people who committed suicide because they thought they were doing so good, and then heard some jerk at a meeting say something like that. Well, doesn't that make you feel better? That you were able to make fun of somebody else that's not in the same place you are and show how, you know, much more in recovery you are than they are. You're not them, and you have no place to make fun of them, especially when they're really trying. And they may just be at a different place than you are. They could be coming off the meds in a few months, but you can turn away a lot of people by saying that, and it's idiotic to say, well, if they really wanted it, they really wanted recovery, they wouldn't run away. Don't use that as an excuse. That is just ridiculous. And also, AA and NA is in itself old and becoming outdated in certain aspects, and people can get angry about saying this, but any set of rules, anything that you take and say it is good and it will work forever and ever, no matter what happens, that is in itself dumb. Things I'm saying will certainly change over time, but sponsors are not infallible. Not like, I mean, in the movies, you see a sponsor or the guy running the meeting, and there's these great gurus that have been sober for years and can answer all your questions. In reality, they're just like anybody else. Sponsors relapse all the time. They give terrible information and advice all the time. One thing, my sponsor, a story he told me, and this is true, there was a woman who had surgery on her lungs, and she was given exercises after the surgery that she had to do, and she was prescribed narcotics because it hurt so bad. But their sponsor, of course, said, no, absolutely not. No, you don't need them. And the woman could not fully do her exercises, and it got worse and worse. And finally, her doctor said, you either do these or you're going to die. So, who is in the right? People can argue this all day and night, but everything's individualized. And these rules definitely need an upgrade. I don't want to hear anybody saying that I'm against AA or NA. Quite the contrary. I think that meetings are important, that their most basic rules apply. The biggest thing you can do in recovery is understand that just because you stop doing drugs does not make you sober. You're still the same person unless you start making these changes. And recovery means nothing if you don't help others, just like you were helped. So, meetings are a place, like I've said before, of predators and disingenuous people, but they're also filled with great wisdom and love a lot of places. You just have to dig the gold out of the crap that you'll hear at every meeting, everywhere. And once again, saying, well, if you really wanted it, you could do it. Well, there's a lot of people that really want it, but if you try to ostracize them, they're not going to want to seek help. And I think there needs to be a change where people that are on meds can be heard and go to these meetings and talk. You're not allowed to speak if you've done any medication, any narcotics, and they're going to call methadone, Suboxone narcotics. And like I said, there's a difference between people abusing them and using them. If people are there at those meetings, that means that they want help, and to try to shut them out and say that they aren't in recovery because they're taking these medications is dumb. It doesn't help anybody. It certainly doesn't help them. And the whole point of these meetings is to help anybody that comes. They need to be worked with to help get off these medications. If they're dying of cancer, if they have spinal cord injuries, any number of things, they need to stay on methadone. Well, it's certainly not your place to tell them that they're not in recovery and they're not trying. You just need to work with them any way you can. I will have another episode on recovery about what leads into addiction. There's going to be a lot because recovery is a huge thing. There's so many different aspects of it. And it's a serious business. I mean, at least this episode is going to be serious. I love making jokes, but I want my points across and people to understand that just because these rehabs, halfway houses, these doctors are saying that they're there for you or your son or your daughter or whatever, you need to look into them, because there are people that are very happy to just take your money and could care less about who you are, what happens to you or your loved ones. You need to ask around, you need to look at reviews, and just to tell your loved one or yourself that, well, you just don't really want it if you don't, well, that's to your peril. That is to your own disservice if you don't look into these things. You can look at any docu like Dope Sick Nation. They talk at length about how the industry in South Florida around West Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Pompano Beach, there are so many rehabs and halfway houses that are just there to use these people up and charge whatever they can from their insurance companies. And if you don't have insurance, good luck finding a rehab that's going to take you. You need help. You need to find help wherever you can to help you get into rehabs if you have no insurance. And most addicts don't have insurance. And if a place was really trying to help so many people, well, wouldn't they care more about helping them and less about how much money they can make off of them? Because, you know, a halfway house gets enough, a rehab gets enough money just on the people that do have insurance to help the ones that don't, but you wouldn't know it from them. Places do have scholarships, and like I said, not every place is like this. You need to do your homework. Some people are in dire straits and need emergency help. It's a dicey situation, but with this information, you'll know things to look out for. And sometimes even with these places that are definitely just trying to get money out of people, their services that they have there will help. And if you can get in, maybe it's best just to take the help you can get with the knowledge that the people that owning it maybe don't care as much. But usually at any place, the ones that work there, well, they do care. And they care a lot, or they wouldn't be working there, because recovery doesn't pay much money. So take everything with a grain of salt. Know what to look out for, know what to expect, but do know that it is much better to go through these things and to be in recovery than to be actively using. In any case, anywhere, anytime, whatever help you can get is better than the alternative, isn't it? Thank you guys for watching. Try to be good to yourselves and really try to love yourselves, because that's the only person you can be sure really will, right? Take care.